Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering, as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So I'm going to talk today about the use of the word narcissism. I actually got called a spiritual narcissist the other day on a thread I was in. I didn't go and ask the person what they meant by that. However, I did feel inspired to make an episode. So I'm not quite sure what a spiritual narcissist is. But I have noticed that people are using this word narcissist a lot at the moment. I've seen a lot of articles and threads and podcasts where people are talking about being in a relationship with a narcissist, or what narcissism is, what happens to you if you're involved with a narcissist. There's very little about what if you are a narcissist yourself, because the narcissist person is the ogre, the bad person, the wicked person in all of these descriptions and discussions. And I looked at that and thought, what do I think about this? I think two things. I think one, if somebody is in a bad situation with another human being and they're suffering, then I do think it's really important that that is addressed. And I do think it's vital that that person, I would hope that that person can find a way to either transform the situation or to exit the situation. So I'm all for that. I'm not very keen on a labeling of people, particularly narcissism actually can be almost a pathological condition, as I understand it. I'm not keen on a labeling like that being used as a catch-all, which I think does happen sometimes, where that catch-all means all people who are unkind and unfair and disrespectful to others. And I think this term narcissist or narcissism has become overused and used in that regard. And I also think, let's say we use the word selfish instead of narcissist. And quite often when I've read these things, what they're essentially saying is that the person is very selfish. One man's definition of selfishness is another person's definition of assertiveness, honesty, self-love. So these things are very subtle and very much open to perception and consideration and point of view and experience. And how we experience someone else when we're involved with them also is very much to do with our capacities, our abilities to speak our truth, our abilities to ask for what we need, to share, and also our genuine sense of inner strength and emotional resilience. All of these things affect our perception of other people. So I think we know these things. We know that, or many of these things are subjective. We know that words get overused. We know that sometimes a word is used as a convenient catch-all. And I think we know that when that happens, sometimes that's a cop-out, because sometimes that enables us to label somebody and say, right, that's the end of the discussion. It's much more convenient than saying, I'm experiencing some difficulties in my relationship or my friendship or my family relationship or whatever it may be. And I feel stuck. I feel unhappy. I'm suffering. I don't know what to do. Because what that does is that says there are many, many avenues of inquiry and exploration, some of which involve self-responsibility, some of which involve communication, some of which might involve negotiation, and some of which might involve actually exiting the relationship. But when we use a convenient label like narcissist, we've actually summed it all up and we've said, that person's bad and wrong. I'm right. They need to leave. And I think that is sometimes lazy thinking. Now, if you are someone who is trapped in a bad situation with somebody and you feel like you can't get out and that person is being a bit of a monster, then you have my heartfelt sympathy for that. And I'm absolutely not saying that that's not true for you. What I'm talking about is the situations where somebody is kind of saying that's what's happening when that's not really necessarily the case, when they're using a shorthand. And I thought to myself, is this a modern phenomenon, using the word like this? And I realized that absolutely not the case. When I was at school, and we're talking about in the early 60s, we'd had Freudianism and psychoanalysis had been around for about 30 years, but they'd only been in the kind of public domain where man on the street would have heard of it for maybe 10 years, let's say something like that. There was this word called facade. And because one of the things that had come out from this sort of psychological work, psychoanalytical work, was the notion that somebody might be kind of, wearing a mask, adopting a persona, a way of appearing to other people that wasn't necessarily genuine to who they are. I don't think this is a new idea for anybody today, but in those days, it was a relatively new idea. And so this term, you have a facade, was the if you like, the insult of the day. It was the demonization of the day. And I, at school, some of the children at school, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old children at school were saying to each other, "You've got a facade," right? And what it meant was, you are less than, I'm better than you, you're worse than me. That's what it meant, essentially. And it was a shorthand. And it was painful to have it said to you. I had it said to me at the time. And at the time, I was genuinely interested in being an authentic, real human being. In fact, my whole upbringing encouraged that. So for them to say that to me, I felt very hurt by it. But now, when I look back at it, I can see that what was actually happening was that wasn't really what they were saying. They were using shorthand to put me down. What they really meant, and I discovered this actually later through investigating, was they found me annoying, they found me irritating, they wished I would stop bothering them, they wished I would go away. Now that would have been hurtful as well, but it would have been more accurate. But one of the effects of the "you've got a facade" approach, or the "you're a narcissist" approach, and there have been many others throughout my life, that you're a commie, you're a lefty, you are a conspiracy theorist, you are there's another one someone called me in 2022. You are a COVID quisling. I just didn't know what that meant, so I went and looked it up, and it meant somebody who doesn't believe that the virus exists. So, and I knew that person didn't think that I didn't believe it existed from conversations. So again, it was just, they'd just thrown it out. And when I went back and said, you said I was a COVID quisling, they said, "No, I never said that." So that's the other thing. When we use these words, these convenient handles, often we say it without thinking. And then afterwards, when someone comes back and says, "You actually said this to me," I would never say that. Because it often is very unconscious. And as we know, being unconscious in our relationships with people is not the path to success. So something I'm interested in at the moment is just watching out for using words that are being bandied about a lot, that are the popular demonization word of the day, and watching out if we're using one of these words. And if we do use one of these words, saying to ourselves, why did I just use that word? Is that what I really mean? Am I trying to close down the conversation and demonize that other person such that I don't have to actually think about the situation? such that I don't have to be present. I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to inquire and explore. And did I actually realize I was saying it at the time? Or was I just doing it unconsciously because that's what everybody else is doing? So if I went back to that person who called me a spiritual narcissist, I'm pretty confident that that person would find it unbelievable that they used that expression. They would not believe they'd done it. And they would probably apologize profusely. But then they might tell me what it was they were annoyed about. And equally on my part, I could get terribly offended and like in my previous episode about self-worth conflation, I could, or maybe that's next week, I can't remember, but there's one about self-worth conflation. I could go back and say, well, I'm a terrible person and I can't ever write or speak to anyone ever again because I'm a spiritual narcissist. And in fact, I better go into therapy to try and get that fixed, try and get that removed. Maybe it needs to be surgically removed from me. Or maybe there's a drug that will get rid of it. So yeah, let's watch ourselves with these shorthands, with these going unconscious, and just notice how the demonization word of the day shifts from time to time to time to time. We've got another one today, which is racist. We've got all these different words which people bandy about. Sometimes they mean it, sometimes they don't mean it. Sometimes they're being lazy, sometimes they're being unconscious. Sometimes they're just following a trend. So over this next week, maybe observe this in yourself or in others. It's easier to observe in others, of course, because we can be more conscious when we're observing others, perhaps. And just see if there's another better, more accurate, more authentic, perhaps more vulnerable way of relating with that human being. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. That's all for Truth and Transcendence for today. Please give a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, write a review if you've got a moment. They make such a difference. Tell your friends and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.